Hey everybody, it's LavenderTowne, and today I'm going to be turning the world's deadliest toxins into characters. Starting off, we have one of the deadliest mushrooms in the world. Known colloquially as the Destroying Angel, the Amanita mushroom is a deadly trickster. Not only is it so violently toxic that even consuming half a cap can be fatal to an adult, but the Amanita mushroom closely resembles edible and commonly foraged mushrooms, like the button mushroom or the puffball. This mushroom is full of a natural toxin called amatoxin, and despite its deadliness, symptoms don't usually appear for hours, at which point the violent destruction of the tissues of the kidneys and liver will be permanent. Alongside its sibling, the death cap, the Destroying Angel are responsible for the vast majority of fatal mushroom poisonings, and combined with their mimicking of edible mushrooms, they are truly terrifying. Destroying Angels grow symbiotically with certain tree roots, and so I propped our character on some roots as a wink to that. The Destroying Angel is typically all white, with some pale color differences in the center, like pastel pink or green. I used this color palette when I was coloring the character, and tried to stay really close to a very bright, light color palette. When thinking about this mushroom character, I thought of her as having an open and friendly attitude, as unlike some other poisonous plants and animals, the Destroying Angel doesn't have any sort of bright coloring or patterning to warn you about its deadly toxins. I think she pretends to be very friendly and approachable, but between her unsettling pale color and the death in her eyes, you should be very wary of her. I put a fork and knife in her hands, alluding to both the way that people mistakenly put these mushrooms into their food, as well as the way that the Destroying Angel eats away at the kidney and liver. Because of the name, I decided to give her some disturbing angel wings, formed out of the kidneys themselves, as kidney damage is the primary way that this toxin becomes fatal. If you are poisoned by the Destroying Angel, for a couple of hours you will feel fine, but over time you will slowly start to be very sick to your stomach. You might even have some cold sweats or some convulsions. Delirium has been reported, and generally intense intestinal distress. And then after that point, it's really dodgy whether or not you will be able to survive. This is why it is so critically important when you're foraging for white mushrooms like the puffball or the button mushroom that you really know the difference and you know what a Destroying Angel really looks like. One of the big differences is that the white gills that the Destroying Angel has are not actually connected to the stalk. So if you see that separation, that's one of the ways that you can tell that this is not a safe mushroom to eat. Personally, I understand this pain. I have foraged for morels, which are my favorite type of mushroom. I love eating them and cooking them, but there are also some mushrooms that look very similar to morels and are very deadly, so mushroom foraging has always seemed a little bit scary and risky to me. For the character, I made sure to limit the color palette very much. I really wanted it to speak to this ghostly white mushroom that we see. The color variations are very subtle, but I did make her liver, wings, as well as her eyes a more saturated or deeper color, just so that we have something fun to look at. I tried to put little bits of mushroom structure into this character design. I gave her sort of a puffy, cloudy type skirt that sort of looks like a mushroom. Of course, we have the mushroom cap on her head, and I tried to make her have puffy sleeves that also speak to this shape. Here is our highly deadly but friendly looking Destroying Angel mushroom. Next, I'm talking about water hemlock. Unlike its look-alike poison hemlock, the poison famously used to kill Socrates, water hemlock is rich in a toxin called cycutoxin, which behaves as a stimulant on the central nervous system. This causes severe seizures, which have been documented as fatal for hundreds of years. Sufferers of hemlock poisoning may also experience hallucinations, numbness, dilated pupils, vomiting, and a host of other severe symptoms alongside the debilitating seizures. Water hemlock looks similar to wild parsnips, wild carrots, and celery, and it has a delicate white flower that looks pretty and harmless. It's a quickly fatal toxin, often causing death in only a handful of hours. For the character, I leaned into the historical usage of poison hemlock as a method of execution in ancient Greece. Unlike water hemlock, poison hemlock is a bit less violent in its toxicology, causing the victim to fall asleep, killing by causing the respiratory muscles to fail. Water hemlock's causing of seizures and hallucinations make it a much more frightening plant, in my opinion, and certainly with the way that it looks like other benign plants, just like the destroying angel. This water hemlock is definitely worth carefully avoiding. For the character, I really wanted to lean into the fact that it causes this overactivity in the brain, as well as the fact that it causes delirium and hallucinations. Amazingly, there's even been reports of fatalities just by having the plant rubbed on the skin, so even skin contact is not safe when it comes to water hemlock. I definitely wanted the character to look sort of like frazzled and wild in the eyes. I decided to actually show this by having the iris in a few different places, and I also used the chromatic aberration filter to make it look like the character's head is sort of blurred. I really wanted to give this impression that like something wild is going on with the head and the brain, because this type of poisoning does seem to affect people more neurologically than some other poisonings, which are often more based around like the stomach and the throat. Water hemlock is a very fast, very fatal type of plant. In fact, when livestock grazes on water hemlock, sometimes they die as quickly as 15 minutes after ingestion. It's also known as cow's bane for this reason. Now, in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have used so much ancient Greek iconography in this character, primarily because poison hemlock and water hemlock are not as similar as I initially thought. That being said, I do like how this character turned out, and when it comes to the effects around his eyes and his head, it's all very accurate to water hemlock and not poison hemlock. It is nice that poison hemlock is not quite so violent in the way that it kills its victims, but either way, both types of hemlock are absolutely terrifying and very, very deadly. The only real way to deal with a poisoning by water hemlock is to try and get the patient to ingest some activated charcoal to help soak up some of the poison, as well as using very aggressive and heavy doses of anticonvulsants to try to stop the seizures, and basically just do whatever you can to support them and keep them alive until the effects of the poison have worn off. The only noticeable color of the water hemlock are its white flowers and the green of its leaves and stalk, so that's what I stuck with for the character design. Here he is, looking absolutely terrifying. Next, a tree that makes the poison apple from Snow White look like a Granny Smith. The Menal Tree is so absurdly deadly that even walking near it during a rainy day can blister your skin. Despite looking similar to a regular apple tree, every single part of the tree is poisonous. The apple-like fruit, the leaves, the bark, and especially the white sap, which can cause blindness as well as severe skin reactions. These trees are so hostile that in some countries, people put a red X or a warning sign on it so that people won't accidentally be harmed. If the tree is burned, even the smoke from the fire will have a corrosive effect on anyone unlucky enough to be nearby. Eating the sweet fruit can cause internal bleeding, with a feeling that the windpipe and throat are being torn up. Because the tree is so absurdly hostile to almost all human life, I wanted the character to have a maniacal expression, with pupilless eyes to allude to the multiple instances of this tree blinding people. I gave her pale hair that is meant to invoke the slow, sticky drips of the sap, and I gave her serrated teeth, not only because it's scary and cool looking, but because the leaves on the tree have serrated edges, and because the tree is described to cause searing or ripping pain on the skin, throat, and eyes. I found one fantastic quote from a movie made in the 1950s where this tree is described as being the only tree where the tree carves its initials into you, and I think that that is such a great and creepy description of what being near the Menal Tree is actually like. Now, it doesn't look overly thorny or anything. Again, it doesn't really have a lot of signs that this is going to be an incredibly toxic tree. And there have been, journals and notes from explorers who tried to eat the apples or got too close to the tree and described the horrible poisoning and the temporary blindness, which could last several days. For this character design, I tried to incorporate a lot of little nods to what the tree actually does. So I wanted to have this sort of puffy, weird, blistery jacket over top of her shoulders. I wanted it to really give off the impression of the effect that the sap has on the skin. It is a contact poison, so it immediately causes like dermatitis and rashes and blistering. I definitely wanted to include that since it is so aggressive and just so wild for a tree to be doing that much damage on a human skin. I also gave her these cute little like branch antlers. She is the only tree representing here in this toxins video, and I do feel like typically it's more like herbs and flowers that are highly toxic, so I wanted to include the fact that this is a tree because she's just so rare. I wanted her to also look absolutely devilish, like her facial expression. She's just reveling in the carnage and everything because, well, in reality, of course, the tree has no malice towards anyone. I do feel like as a character, it's a bit overkill to have every part of the tree be deadly poisonous and cause blindness and blistering. It's a bit extreme. For the color palette, I really wanted to have a lot of reds again because I want the coat to sort of nod to the blistering, and because in some countries the Menal Tree is marked with a red X, so I thought red would be good. And then of course, as I mentioned before, her hair is meant to represent the white sap. The apples on the tree are green, so I had her eating one of those. I know it's very literal, but I did like to have at least one little symbol or something of the actual look of the plant. Like with Hemlock, I had sort of a nod to the actual leaves alongside his hair. For her, I definitely had to include the apple because that's the part that draws people in, you know, especially if they're on some kind of a travel or a mission and they want a quick snack. It could look very tempting, and you would have no idea that even stepping close to this tree has already put you in mortal danger. Next up, we have a plant known as the angel's trumpet. There's a lot of stuff about angels here, I think because I guess these poisons send you to the angels, but the real name of it is the Brugmansia, I believe that's how you pronounce it, a plant in the nightshade family. Now, these plants are actually so poisonous they kind of played themselves on accident. It's thought that originally the plant was able to seed by being eaten by megafauna, but at this point they're extinct in the wild because they're just so toxic that their seeds can't be spread by animals because everything that eats them dies. So it is quite a wildly toxic and deadly plant. It is ornamental, and you will sometimes see it in gardens, or I even see it around here in LA. There are people who I'm pretty sure just grow these like in their yard, which is a little alarming because I do have a tendency to touch plants when I'm walking around, and I realize that I probably shouldn't do that because there has been at least one woman who has been hospitalized from touching one of these plants and then touching her eye. She ended up having one eye dilated and stuck dilated for several hours, and she felt quite sick. So I guess this is just a reminder to both you guys and myself not to touch random plants if you don't know what they are, even if they are very beautiful like this one. They grow to be quite a large size. They're like a giant bush with many stalks going into the ground, and then they have this drooping flower that faces down towards you. Usually you can like step under it and look up into the flowers. They also tend to smell very nice. They're just very appealing, and so I wanted this character to be very cute and unassuming. I had her with the trumpet, of course, because it's the angel's trumpet, and they really do look like trumpets. Like, I don't think they're, you know, stretching with that imagery. And I wanted to make sure that that sort of shape, that bell shape, is being carried through other parts of the design. Like in her hair, I gave her a hairstyle that kind of looks like that shape over and over and over. I also decided to, of course, give her a little hat that looks like the trumpet. I really was just going overboard there. And I also wanted to put a chain on her. She's sort of shackled, and that's because the continued survival of this plant depends on people cultivating them. Again, because they just became way too toxic for the animal world as it exists now, and they really need help germinating their seeds and growing other places, like not right under their mother plant. So it really caused a lot of problems for this plant, and they would be totally extinct if humans did not find them kind of adorable and beautiful and nice smelling. Now, what happens to you if you consume this plant, whether it's the seeds or the leaves or the flowers, or even if it's put into like a tea? The most famous thing that's known to happen if you consume this plant is it causes absolutely terrifying hallucinations, delusions. It can put people into psychosis, it can cause amnesia, and generally it has some quite violent neurological effects alongside the usual poisoning symptoms such as like an upset stomach. The hallucinations can be quite terrifying and cause people to do strange things that they would not normally do. There was at least one case where a man drank a tea with this plant in it and ended up amputating his own tongue during the episode where he was essentially hallucinating and in psychosis due to the consumption of this plant. So it's not something that's typically used recreationally, though occasionally a diluted version of it can be used to help induce vomiting in a medical setting. So here are some of the world's deadliest toxins as human character designs. If you enjoyed this, I also have a few other videos in this series. I have 2 on poisons and some on diseases. You should definitely check it out. Thank you so much for watching till the end, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much to my wonderful patrons, including Colorful Ambitions, Aaron, Viet, Raccoon Jam, Grexius, Olia, Brandon Stark, CB, Lucy Amajiki, Liv, Salty Jackrabbit, Ravenscrow, Zocelot, T-Hill Music, Jabber Dabber Doo, Kadaria, Deadly Nightshade Art, Astrofox Art, The Expressive Poker Face, Tsubaki, Cutie Pie, Kola, JJ Jade, and of course, blah 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 blah.